Greetings, brothers and sisters from the internets. Welcome back. This is Scott with the Crescive method. Today we're going to kind of swerve into another lane and try something new. Sarah and I here at the Crescive method always try to keep our ear to the streets and take note of the questions that are being asked of us during our given work week and try to respond to the common conversations and content of our conference calls throughout the week. And so today we're bringing a new first session of a new concept called Real Talk, where we just kind of break it down. And it's not necessarily going to be stuck to just cannabis or even agriculture. It's going to be just real talk about the current state of the world, what we've got on our mind, and what we need to do as humans to continue to thrive in such uncertain times. And so I figured I would take this first session of Real Talk and keep it 100 with the current state of the cannabis industry. You know, that's where a lot of my time is spent. Really where I try to make the biggest impact on the world is through the cannabis industry. Excuse me, got a little bit of frog in my throat. But so today, we're going to talk about real talk and skills. So one of the things that is constantly being asked of us, which we're getting pretty close to offering, is a consultant training program. And I figured until we're ready to formally launch a professional platform for training people to be consultants, I figured I could at least start with YouTube content with professional skills. And so my component of Real Talk in this new series is professional skills. Today we're going to start with the mindset, because the mindset drives everything, really. If you're paying attention to our basics series, the first series we started with was the mindset. And nothing else really seems to fall in line unless you got your mind right? So I guess I'm kind of simultaneously addressing cannabis growers that are in the legacy markets that maybe want to maintain their position in the legacy markets, those that are in the legacy markets that want to move into the regulated or commercial markets, or those of you that are just hobbyist growers that ultimately want to be a commercial cultivator. So I'm kind of addressing cannabis growers in general, more specifically this week on, people with prior history. And I'm also trying to tie it into the same mindset of those of you that are Soil Food Web graduates that have an intention to be agricultural advisors and guide farms through the cultivation process. And so there's a lot of similarities between what makes each of those individuals successful. I'm aware that a lot of our viewership is Soil Food Web grads. I'm also aware that a lot of my viewership is my competitors in the industry. And to be completely honest, there's a lot of things I've not been talking about on YouTube because I know those that are, I guess you could say, the closest to competing with Sarah and I are people that watch this show. And I've realized over the last couple weeks, you can't pick and choose who you impact. You just need to send the message. And so I don't want people out there that really need to hear my message to not be able to hear it, because I don't want, one of my competitors that speaks bad about me on the internet to benefit from it as well. And you just can't pick and choose. And so I either need to, myself, sack up and send the message or not. And so this is also a first attempt of me overcoming some of my own hurdles, which is, to be quite clear, being somewhat reserved in communicating messages that need to be communicated at this point. And so I'm going to try and put that aside tonight and try to reach those viewers that can hear my message and provide value to those that can use it. Because let's be real, y'all, the cannabis industry is on fire right now. It is absolutely on fire, and it's really uncertain for those of us that have legacy experience. I came from an extremely qualified network of cannabis cultivators. My network ran from Northern California to the border of Tijuana, Mexico, and I had some very solid crews in between there. I got like 2 or 3 dudes that are still active with legitimate shots at a serious future in the cannabis industry, and that's one of the things that has really weighed on me, because when I originally set out on this journey, my original goal was honestly a little bit out of panic. I really kind of doubled down hard on my current position, if you will, in around 2012 when Colorado went legalized. And it was part panic, part opportunity that I saw, in that there might be an opportunity in a legal position for me, but if things were going legal, inevitably those illicit markets were going to have to shrink. And we're in some significant points of shrinkage at this time. So I think it's important to understand that I first started this journey with the single goal to be a qualified employee at a legal facility. Like, I personally set the bar, I don't want to say low, because there's nothing wrong with being an employee, but where I set my original goal, I blew past that within a few years pretty handily. And it's because of the why behind what I originally set out on that goal, and why I do what I do, and why I got into the cannabis industry in general. And so a lot of motivational speakers, business books, success people, you can find it all over YouTube, they all say the why is the most important. And so whether you're a cultivator, legacy market grower, soil food web grad trying to lead and advise farms into the future, you cannot go anywhere without a serious why. And the reason why I went from originally intending to secure myself in a safe position of a reasonable living wage, of living and working at a regulated cannabis farm and just being qualified. And, in 2018, I was brought to a foreign country to brief their vice president. Like, that's way past being an employee at a facility. And, in that context, a foreign government viewed me personally, Scott Scamness, as one of the most qualified people that they could bring from the United States to give them stats, metrics, plant health problems, what the biggest areas of obstacles were, so that they could refine and redefine their legal market. That's a long ways from just being an hourly employee at a legal facility. And that wasn't my aim. I didn't shoot that far. I didn't say someday I'd hope to sit down with a vice president of a country and do metric conversions of pounds per square foot and crop loss statistics. I just wanted to be as qualified as humanly possible. It was that why. The reason why you do things is what affects your perspective, and your perspective will drive your performance. And another way to put it would be, how you view what you do will always affect how you do what you do. And so my goal was to become an employee, but because my why is so mother effing strong, I blew way past all that stuff. And so, my why and why I got into cannabis was pretty serious, and it maintains to be pretty serious. My sister was diagnosed with cancer in 2000. It was pretty much a death sentence. At one point, she had almost over 90 lumps in her lungs. It was wrecked, y'all. It was wrecked. And she beat the cancer. They gave her 9 weeks to live, and 2.5 years later, she was raging. And she actually beat the cancer. It was the exit procedure that killed her. And you talk about a moment to lose all faith in the traditional systems, that was a pretty good one to do it there for you. And so when my sister first got diagnosed, they offered her a medical marijuana card. And at that time, I wasn't a smoker. I had smoked in my earlier years and got caught and got my ass whooped. So I was honestly not really getting into the weed too much at that point in my high school years and just after. And so we kind of almost laughed at the fact, like when my sister got diagnosed, our mind state and our view from that point was not that cannabis on any reality that we possess could cure cancer. And my sister was never a smoker at all. And so it wasn't even a consideration for her to try. And we just kind of laughed about it, honestly. And then after she passed away, in those several years, met person after person after person after person that felt that they cured their cancer with cannabis. And in this drive to be a qualified employee, I learned all the basic foundational components of plant health, of mineral nutrition, of biological balance, how to be a professional consultant. And in that journey, I at some point got hired by a facility where one of the partners was Michael Masterman Smith, who did cancer research at UCLA, I believe it was. And so this why was so powerful that even my goal was to be an employee, I became the leader of a facility for an actual cancer researcher. Like, like, you know, that was so far past where I wanted to go, you know. And as you can see, the why's real, right? That's some real deep shit. So that's my why. That's what's driving it behind me. And to further compound and strengthen and fortify my why were experiences along the way. So when I decided to publicly announce that I was going to pursue a career in cannabis, most of my family members stopped talking to me. You know, obviously I stay in contact with my mom. I've been given the opportunity to raise my sister's child, who was 2 when she passed away. And, you know, so these experiences of life continue to strengthen and invigorate my why. And that's what keeps me going. You know, I today in general, I did 7 hours of Zoom calls today. I did 2 hours of recording videos. This Science Bro session is going to run about an hour and a half. And when I get done, I got about 4 hours of video processing. And then tomorrow morning, I got to get back at it at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, so all in total today, I'll be staring at this damn camera for almost 12, 14 hours. That was never my goal. That was never anything I wanted. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to make the most of this opportunity, but it's not anything I ever wanted to do. But because of my why, it led me on a path that this is now the need. And so because I am working from this why, I can execute this need. And I can be grateful and make the most of the opportunity that I have in front of me, which just so happens to figure out how to be a goddamn video producer and YouTube content creator. And, you know, so I continue to evolve with the need and the opportunities. But without this why, without a solid why, people will burn out. And I've gotten to a couple places in my career where the workload was quite high. The travel road was remarkably overwhelming. And I love this Inky Johnson quote. He's one of my favorite dudes on the internet. I do a lot of E.T., the hip hop preacher. I do a lot of Inky Johnson. I'm not so much into David Goggins, but, you know, I like a little bit of yelling in the morning to get my shit together. And one of my favorite things about Inky Johnson is he says this quote. He says, people don't burn out because of what they do. People burn out because life makes them forget why they do it. And the only times that I've legitimately gotten burnt out and gotten kind of fed up with this life that I've created was when I lost touch of the why. You know, part of my childhood was spent in an agricultural community just after the farm crisis in the early 80s. Like, I've sat in my uncle's brokerage office with farmers that were on the verge of suicide because things were so bad. That's part of my why. Part of my why is because I possess the skills, the capabilities, the analytical tools, the spreadsheet knowledge, the ability to define variation and modify it and correct it to keep farmers off the suicide list. You know, that's my why. And so if you have a powerful enough why, it will carry you through everything. And me particularly, because I've been so outspoken about the shenanigans and tomfoolery in the industry, it seems like a goddamn once a year, somebody from the internet spends a couple weeks of their life trying to trash the shit out of my name. And it's like, none of that stuff matters to me. It so far has not slowed me down at all. It hasn't kept me from doing anything other than digging in harder, because my why is deeper than somebody who's chasing clout on the internet trying to trash me, or somebody that is being paid by an internet retailer to dissuade you from listening to me. And that shit is so small compared to my why. But it can't just stop at the why, right? So if you have a good motivation and a foundational system for why you're doing what you're doing, and that allows you to set expectations and set goals and move towards something that you want to do, if your work ethic isn't there, you're not going to make it, right? And so it's important to never set your expectations higher than your work ethic, and be honest about that. This is something, honestly, in certain aspects, has been a struggle for me. There's not many people that can functionally outwork me, physical wise, I come from a sports background, high level athletics. I've coached kids that have gone on to set NCAA records. And I just come from some, let's be real, some just animal motherfuckers. And it's very rare that somebody physically outworks me. But where I've struggled is in organization and at certain times discipline. And so once I got to a certain level of success, that allowed me to, because of my talents and because of my natural ability, get me to sometimes places that were higher than my character at that time was able to sustain. And so there's been rise and minor falls, rise and minor falls. And that's just the way it goes. You have to be able to have some sort of grounding aspect of your life, a yoga practice, a sport, some sort of disciplinary action that you can impart your will on every day to keep you grounded and keep you disciplined and keep you honest with yourself. My senior year in high school, we got a speech from one of our coaches. It was one of the most life-changing things I've ever experienced. And he talked about a story of a player that he had that was way too small, the whole deal. And what he started doing was putting goals above his doorway. And every time he walked out of his bedroom, he would slap the doorway and essentially affirm these goals that he had. That's something I still do to this day at 41. Every Sunday, I sit down and take a legitimate analysis of where I'm at, where I'm at in relation to where I want to be. You have to, at those times, take some honest analysis and quantification of, are you doing it? Are you really doing it, or are you fooling it? And then I'll make notes on the bathroom mirror of what it is I need to tighten up. And, every morning when I go to leave, I sit with those things that are written on the mirror, and I don't leave that bathroom until I can say them without discomfort. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. Sometimes I don't even have to look at it. It just comes out. And so you need a check and balance system that keeps your expectations and your ability and your ethics and your character and your ability to put your nose to the grindstone, bite your mouthpiece, and ram your head forward into the world right now. Because as long as we got $7 diesel, this is not a time to be casual. This is not a time to lay back. This is not a time to just blow weed and F off on Instagram all day. And I'm not saying that's bad, and I'm not saying you can't do that, but the dinosaurs that getting stuck in the mud are the ones that ain't moving. So you're going to have to kind of figure it out. And we're in a weird time right now where the Instagram world is kind of skewing the reality. And I don't play the popularity game. I don't do any social media. I haven't been on there for 2 years. We do this YouTube thing, and we just work. And so I don't play at all the popularity game, but I've seen situations where people can gain clout on Instagram, and that affords them an opportunity that their character and their abilities are not able to sustain them. And so we're now, for the first time, seeing situations where people can allow their popularity to bring them to places that their abilities cannot sustain. This is one of the biggest issues with people with cannabis growing experience right now. And to be quite frank, and I mean this in no disrespect, this is just an analytical response from somebody who is inside some of the largest and smallest commercial facilities around the planet, not just in California anymore, around the United States and around the planet. And this one aspect of cannabis cultivators with experience that are getting an opportunity to run a facility because they're popular, and they don't have the drive, they don't have the discipline, and they don't have the legitimate abilities to sustain that facility. And I'm not saying I magically was born with them. I had to develop them. And that one phenomenon is the main factor as to why less and less cannabis growers or people with legacy experience are getting an opportunity in the commercial market. The commercial markets are kind of burnt out on this reality where people with cannabis experience come in with a certain level of entitlement and just don't perform to the level of their entitlement. And so you're starting to see a lot of cannabis farms, legal, regulated commercial facilities, hire young people off the street that have no experience, that are eager, that are willing to learn, that are moldable, and that show up and work hard. And that's been one of the most difficult things for me, because when I moved into this position of math and science and spreadsheets, it was my role in our crew for the overall goal. So some guys ran the cultivation facilities, some guys made the hash, Some guys, distributed the products. I've always been the math guy. I've always been the guy that calculates kilowatt hours. I've always been the guy that calculates amps and volts and all these mathematical things. That's always the value that I've provided. And so when I moved to this position, nothing's changed about how I view my role as in the industry. I've never been the biggest grower. That's not been my role. My role has been to determine the mathematical foundations for why things are happening and disseminate it and describe it in a way that the cultivators can understand and execute. That's what I do. In the commercial facilities, a lot of times I'm literally a translator between the investment side and the cultivator side to try and get them onto some sort of common ground so that they can understand each other, and so that the investment side can communicate their misunderstandings, frustrations, or even just trying to outfit their cultivator with what they need. And then I sit down with the cultivator and try to discern what it is that is the major obstacle. Where is it that they're feeling that they're not up to par, and how do we bring them up to par so that they can be successful? And so I spend a lot of my time in conversations between cannabis growers and between non-cultivation business aspects of the industry. And that one aspect is why I was one of the most qualified people to go to a foreign country. And so that's what I do. And that still takes work. That still takes cultivation. That still takes preparation. That still takes research. Like all these books, these aren't props. Like Sarah and I have read all of these books. When we set out as a couple on this goal, I mean, I guess we both had the goal separately. A lot of the books we both had when we met, which is kind of funny. But I've always approached it as school. I'm not saying I liked school, but when I decided to make this journey in 2012, I would pick 2 or 3 books, a research paper, something other than the internet, something other than websites. Like, I think it needs to be a little bit more of substance, because a lot of the website stuff, the internet stuff, is swayed by people that sell products. And so in order to get to the real meat of it, I think you got to get more towards the books and some of the scientific publications, which I get isn't for everybody, but that's why we're having the soil balancing class. I distill it down. Regardless, you need to prepare yourself. You need to understand what it is you need to know in order to be successful at this new scale. Unfortunately, in the legacy markets and prior to 2012, there was a by all means necessary approach in the cannabis cultivation space. Most growers, it didn't matter if they had dreadlocks and Bob Marley tattoos and grew organic, most of them were using Eagle 20, Avid, and Floramite. Some people were doing the trilogy and mixing all them things. I mean, all through California, it's a standard procedure to dip clones in the trilogy, which is another part of my why. When I saw that shit going on, I'm like, this is causing cancer. This is absolute absurdity, and in my opinion, disrespectful to human life. And I think a lot of the people that are losing their opportunity to cultivate in the legacy markets are people that have been poisoning humans for decades. And I think there's a very clear correlation between those that have been spraying toxic chemicals on their flowers and shipping it to Virginia. A lot of those people are losing their opportunity to grow. I think there's something there. I think the market is communicating that they're tired of being poisoned, and you're starting to see the legal pounds not get sold on the markets and make it into the legacy. And the consumers are choosing those products because they don't have Eagle 20, they don't have Avid, they don't have hardeners and all that flipper baby bullshit. And so we're seeing a requirement of all cultivators to make radical change. And the unfortunate thing for the trajectory of cannabis is the Eagle 20s and the Floramites and the Avids, all these systemic compounds that are not even designed to be on edible food crops, let alone combustible inhalable crops. Those were a crutch. And those crutches allowed us to get very dysfunctional with mineral chemistry. They allowed us to get very dysfunctional with soil biology. And that's really distorted the reality of what the grower thinks this plant needs in order to grow healthy. When you pull that myclobutanol away, or that Avid or imidacloprid, or the hardeners and whatnot, when you pull those away, usually a thing blows to shit. And that's where I come in. I solved that problem between 2012 and 2014. By 2016, I would call myself a premier professional at figuring out how to grow cannabis without Eagle 20. I've worked for famous ass hydroponic growers that moved from the black markets into the legal markets, and they didn't know how to grow without Eagle 20. I've worked with larger hydroponic farms than I've worked with living soil farms. It's a crazy phenomenon. And because I figured out the puzzle of how not to use systemic fungicides, most of it's biologically based, a lot of it's mineral chemistry based, and it simply just takes analysis. And so if you want to proceed forward, whether as a cultivator or as an advisor, especially as an advisor, you don't even try to be an advisor unless you're willing to figure out what nutrients do, what balance is ideal. We have some classes to help you out with that. Arden Anderson's great, William Albrecht, Neil Kinsey, John Kemp to a certain degree. I think he's got some really antiquated ideas about soil chemistry and biology, but nonetheless, still great resources to start with. But you have to prepare. You have to prepare what's coming forward, and you need to be able to execute on those opportunities that come in front of you. One of the things I feel I've been very good at is being prepared for when the opportunity presented itself, I could execute without fear and move up one more rung of the ladder. And so there's a quote from sports that says, most have the will to win, few have the will to prepare. And the level of preparation that Sarah and I do before a project would probably blow your minds. In the soil balancing class, I go over some of the preliminary research and investigation I do before going to a project. If it's an outdoor agricultural field, I'll look at aerial maps, I'll pull a soil survey. I'll try to do as much investigation as I can on the crop, the style of practice that the farmer is engaging in. If it's not cannabis, I'll research the crop in general. If it's not, so on a 2-day site visit, I might do a couple days of preparation. And then after the 2-day site visit, I might have another day or two of wrapping up and form writing and preparing reports and really providing a value. From this point forward, if you're not legitimately providing a value, there's going to be less and less opportunities for you into the future. And that's one of the things that was instilled to me at a very young age, that you always provide value. And I've gotten some really good opportunities in my life because when I was first presented with the opportunity, even if I didn't know what I was doing, I provided value. And so the very first cannabis cultivation facility I ever saw in person was 20,000 square foot of indoor, and it had hydroponics. It had rock wool tables. It had Dutch buckets. It had an undercurrent system. It had a Fox Farm soil-based system. It was like some Willy Wonka crazy stuff. And I was invited to that property because I could do math, because I was willing to trim. I had construction and tools, and I could build out rooms. And I was just there, and I was eager, and I was just grateful for the opportunity and provided value. And then from that experience, I gained more knowledge, I gained more experience, and then the next opportunity that presented itself, I provided value. And I think one of the reasons why I gained so much cannabis cultivation experience is I was willing to trim. In the legacy markets, a farmer is most vulnerable at trim time. And I think a lot of people get above that and they don't want to do it and they're too cool for it. And it's like, I valued that time. I would sit down and we would look at the flower and we would trim it and we would smoke it. And I would talk to the cultivator and we would talk about the problems. We would talk about the products he's using on the shelf, things that he thought would provide value, things that he thought were causing a step up. And so all of the things that led to me being qualified to speak to you now, a lot of those came from doing the lowest level activity that most people are too good to do and doing very intimate hands-on research of what that flower looked like, what it tastes like, what did it smoke like, what were the bottles on the wall, And that gave me almost like a cannabis sommelier thing. If somebody uses systemic fungicide, I can usually taste it pretty clearly. Same with the neonicotinoids, it makes my tongue feel funny. And so that gave me very real, visible, and functional understandings and visceral feelings in my body of what the different nutrients tasted like and what the different hardeners tasted like and the pesticides tasted like. And now that I get to a consultant role, looking back, that's the only time a farmer was 100% honest with me, and it's just the function of the thing. So if you're trying to be a cannabis consultant or really any agricultural advisor at all, it's not that anybody's trying to be deceitful or problematic. It's just farmers don't necessarily talk about everything. And then there's a certain degree of omission and not wanting to tell you. And so all of those trim sessions, when I saw the bottles and had the honest conversations with the farmer and saw the powdery mildew and saw the mites, and saw what they did, that allows me to fill in the gaps when I'm now working with a farmer that tells me 20 to 30% about what's going on. That's one of the major factors as to why we're so successful, is because I have those years, from 2012 to 2017 or so, where I was in the kitchen doing it. So, I hope I haven't gotten too ranty there, but some key takeaways, I guess you could say, is define a why. Why are you doing this? Are you growing weed just because you don't want to be paying taxes? That's probably not going to get you through this next phase. You need a deeper why. If you're doing it because you want to get some girls, that'll fade. If you're doing it because you want clout on the internet, that's cool. Now you're doing something illegal and agreeing to be surveilled by the government for popularity. That's not a long-term strategy of success. Not being disrespectful, but be real with what it is. And so there's a radical need and a radical requirement like never before on you as a cannabis cultivator, especially with legacy experience, to make radical change. One of the things that I always brag about with cannabis growers is that they have historically been the most adaptable, the most able to change, the most able to think outside the box, the most able to find solutions within their own facility. And now that we're up against this new problem, a lot of people are freezing. And so part of that psychology, if we get into too deep of a fight or flight, or I think what they call high beta brainwaves, it gets hard. You get tunnel vision. It goes into survival mode. It becomes very difficult to make new decisions. It becomes very difficult to make a course correction. And that's one of the main reasons why I do yoga. It keeps me out of that fight or flight. I feel like I was in fight or flight from 2009 till I met my wife and started going to yoga in 2017. I mean, I was stuck in fight or flight for 9 straight years, I think. And so if you've been growing cannabis for 20 years and looking over your shoulder, it's likely that you're operating at this high stress, high beta zone, which keeps you tunnel vision, which keeps you reactive, which keeps you from going outside the box. And so I'm not saying you got to do yoga. I think it's the best thing I've ever done, but go for a walk, go for a bike ride, go for a hike, go to the gym. Find something that allows you to move out of those high fight or flight, high beta brain waves and move into a more comfortable space to where you can see clearly and make clear decisions. And because what's required moving forward is I mean, it's a lot, right? It's not just the cannabis experience. It's that Lake Mead is almost empty. It's that for the first time in human history, the average homeowner that knows nothing about the planet realizes there's something wrong with the weather, right? And so this isn't just a black market cannabis opportunity thing. This is like a human survivability issue. And the reason that Sarah and I work through the cannabis industry is because for the most part, they're the most open, most willing to work outside the box, and we are leading every aspect of agriculture, in my opinion, as far as high performance because of our opportunities to have 4 harvests in a calendar year. One time in 2016, we were working for another consultant. My early work was actually working for other consultants and helping them refine and retune what they did for the legal markets. And I was working for a guy that was managing 1 million square feet of cannabis. And we also got an opportunity to work with a corn farm that was 6,000 acres. And so we had 2 cultivators that had the desire to be the largest living soil version of their type. And in that corn year, it was a bad year for organic corn. The rain was there. You have to stagger the plantings so it doesn't get contaminated by the GMO. And all we learned that year in corn was it was a bad year for corn. So we learned a little procedural stuff. We learned a little bit about some of the equipment. We didn't learn much about our effects on corn that year. In that same calendar year, we had 4 harvests on 26 properties over 1 million square feet, we learned effectively 50 to 100 years of farming experience in that one calendar year. There was no turning back for me. I was ready to, ditch agriculture all in total to focus only on cannabis until agriculture and food farming and large-scale cultivation was ready for what we were dishing out on a living soil standpoint. And I'm very grateful for that experience. I'm grateful for the opportunity to try multiple times a year in multiple rooms and make small measurable changes to see what the outcomes were. That's what service Sarah and I provide for farmers. We provide the guidance and the scientific process in order to get actionable answers of activities in the cultivation space. And so at every step of the way, we've had to adjust. We've had to, leave something behind. And like I said earlier, my goal was not to be what I am today. That was none of my vision. My vision was to provide value to farmers. My vision was to keep farmers in business. My vision was to use my skills with mathematics and understanding and deciphering patterns to keep farmers in business. The net effect of that why is what brought me here. And so along the way, I've had to let go of some stuff. Like, I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to stare into a camera and have my job go on through this pandemic shit. But it's not anything I ever really wanted to do. And to a certain degree, to take the most opportunity of what we had with our classes, and with, communicating through the internet, providing value, I've had to let go of some other goals. And so when you're on this progression from moving from point A to point B in the development of your life, it's not where you're trying to go in life that's the problem. It's what you are willing to leave behind in order to get to the next step. And so in order to move to where I'm at, I had to leave behind living in California. It just wasn't a good fit anymore. There's better laws in Utah for the business that I operate. And if inflation is going up, I need to move my business to a point where I can be more profitable as to not have to radically increase prices on our services to clients. And so moving from California, the place I never thought I would leave, to this cold ass snowy place with all these Mormons, is what allows me to move on to the next step. And so I had to be willing to leave behind being able to wear Vans with no socks all through the year, to get some of those crazy all-weather flip-flops that people wear here, which I'm not getting. I'm not doing the Keen flip-flops, but I do got to get a pair of cold weather shoes. And so I guess I'm rambling, but what I'm trying to convey, and most importantly, I'm not trying to offend any legacy growers. I'm literally trying to offer a hand to pull you forward from where you're at to where I've been able to navigate. And I see a lot of legacy growers really digging in their heels. I've got personal friends that mean the world to me that have been given opportunities at legal facilities, and they're just too fucking hard-headed to even take my advice or make any sort of measurable change. And they go into these opportunities, to be honest, as arrogant, entitled assholes, and they get fucking fired. And so I've had situations where people that have slept at my house, people that are very dear to me, have gotten commercial opportunities, and they couldn't even accept my opportunity and advice through arrogance and stubbornness. And instead of just accepting what this new opportunity was for them, they tried to force it into what it was before, and it's no longer that. And so if you try to hold on to the history of what was, you're going to do it at the expense of your destiny. And at some point, you just have to let go of what you thought it should be and make the most and live in what it is. I'm not saying all this commercial cannabis stuff has been, all beauty and roses. There's been some really fucked up shit. And we've seen some really crazy behavior. We've seen some really disgusting behavior. We've seen some people really destructive to the plant. We've seen some people be really disrespectful to the plant. But it is what it is. And this is the opportunity that's provided to me. Thankfully, as a small business, I can be fairly selective as what jobs I take on. And so we try to, at every step of the way, choose farms that have cannabis experience. But the reality is those numbers are dwindling every day in the legal markets. And some of that's by design. It's not designed to make you succeed. And that's one of the heaviest things that's weighed on me is watching that the system is rigged, and watch it squeeze dudes like David King to where he can't even functionally, realistically dream about cultivating in the Humboldt Mendocino area because the taxes are so high. Unfortunately, that's been by design. And, there's been kind of like a extermination, extinction event in the Humboldt Mendocino areas. And I say this in the most polite way possible, but those are some of the areas that use the most Eagle 20 and have poisoned the most humans across the United States. I think there's a correlation. I'm not saying David King's one of them dudes, but I'm just saying some of the dirtiest weed I've seen has come out of those regions. And so are there higher forces? Are there unseen hands? Are there immeasurable forces that are shaping the market into people that are respecting their human counterparts and are producing medicine and are at least at minimum producing cannabis that is non-toxic? Do you know, I can't even define how many people I've been into their farm that are organic growers or Haiti growers with the dreadlocks and all that shit, and they're spraying Eagle 20. And it's like, ship it east, And like this attitude of like, fuck it, ship it east. Like, that game's over, y'all. And now you're seeing a radical swing, and you're seeing the consumer literally demand something other than, unfortunately, they're encapsulating it all into hydroponics. But I think what the consumer means is chemically grown cannabis using products that are for the cut flower industry. I just don't think the consumer is that educated to know that it's not really hydroponics. It's the nasty chemicals that all farmers have been using in the legacy markets. And so, just one bit of advice: if you're a legacy grower and you want to move into the future, you got to find a way to grow without systemic fungicides, systemic insecticides, and a whole bunch of BS. You just have to. And that takes a radical change in how you do it. It takes a change in how you manage mineral chemistry. It takes a change in how you manage soil biology. It takes a change in how you feed and fertilize those plants. But if you make those changes, you can move away from those chemicals, and it's a little bit easier to move your product, I think. So hopefully I didn't get too ranty. I don't know, man. I just feel like there's a lot of people that are really frustrated and they don't know what direction to go. And you might not like what I'm saying and it might offend you, but I'm telling you the truth of what's happening in the market, and it's yours to make an adjustment if you wish. So just to kind of wrap it up, if you're intending to be an advisor, you need the foundational knowledge. You need to understand soil chemistry. You need to understand soil biology. You need to understand nutrient balance. You also need to understand psychology and how to manage the farmer. You could know all those other things, but if you can't manage a system, and you can't teach a farmer how to manage a system, and you can't discern what farmers are capable of managing a system, you're not going to be successful as well. And so you need to be a multifaceted human and put all these skills together in order to help contribute and be successful. Or you can kind of slide back into more of the analytics phase, which is where we started, and how we really built up our expertise to the level we are now. Is, as a soil food web graduate, I had many other skills, but the offering I made to the market was simply analytics with the microscope. And it was my ability to make the most of every opportunity that now made me as qualified as I am now. And so at every step of the way, I just kept working up and moving and learning new skills and working with cultivators and finding out what they did and asking the right questions and being humble in those situations, being grateful, and then making the most of every single opportunity. If you're a cannabis cultivator and you're in the legacy market and you want to move into the legal markets, you need to familiarize yourself with nutrient balance, whether that's in hydroponics. If you're in hydroponics, you got to get yourself a water content meter. You got to start doing some nutrient analysis, and you got to do more than measure ppms and balance pH. That doesn't cut it anymore. You need to have a functional understanding of what the targets might be and how to measure them. There's a lot of guys from the legacy markets that are struggling with the 9-to-5 gig. And I understand a lot of people, myself included, I chose cannabis because it allowed me to be in a warehouse by myself in the middle of the night and support myself. So if you're going to move out of this like bear cave world and move into like a time card punching world and work with employees, that's going to take a new development of skills and ability to adapt and refine to the current situations. or you got to do something else, honestly. I'm sure there'll always be a lot of opportunities for some legacy markets. I'm not saying everybody that's not a legal farm is going to get shit, but it's definitely going to move down to the last few percent of the absolute best in the legacy markets. I think the legal commercial markets are going to be much more tolerant of subpar growing because those can be managed with money and investments and branding and Instagram. It's those legacy markets that absolutely have to perform and produce the fire. And because there's so many legal farms coming on board, and because so many pounds are leaking into the legacy markets that do not have systemic fungicides and do not have avid, and do not have all these nasty chemicals that cause your lungs to burn, it's going to be real hard pushing off some black market weed that makes your throat burn, and just be real. So that's why you're seeing a radical shift of the consumer demanding living soil cannabis. That's why we're doing this YouTube channel, because there is a radical exponential growth towards the instant requirement of at least very clean cannabis, but people are asking for living soil weed. I've had people call me outside of this country to say that there's a hard time selling hydroponically grown cannabis right now. I had 2 people call me last week that said they cannot sell their hydroponic weed. They're ready to bring me on to learn this living soil. So I hate to say it, but there's a timeline where salt grown weed is even going to have a place to go outside of the commercial markets with massive branding and Instagram pushes. It's just not going to move. And so if you're in the legacy market, my advice would be to truly figure out how to actually do living soil. Not drain to waste cocoa with Eagle 20. I mean, like, really grow living soil, clean herb that doesn't make your throat expand and catch fire and make your tongue tingly. So that would be my survival advice for either advisors or for those planning to stay in the legacy markets. So I guess we can try and jump to some of the comments. I guess I've finished my rant, and we can kind of go to some questions if there's some other questions. We'll just start dropping some chats here, some comments, say what's up to all the homies. We had a couple confirmations of some things along the way. This is a good one right here. This is a Kobe Bryant deal. This is a Michael Jordan deal. They only compete with themselves. And that's what I've tried to do. Again, I come from a sports background, where we would play a football game on Friday night, but then Saturday morning we were analyzing tape. We were reviewing our performance. And when I got into coaching softball, we would sit down and analyze batting technique. That was my job. I would film and break down film. And so a lot of my life has been being honest with my performance, having ability to quantify your performance. Usually it's through video, interestingly enough. So in football, we would watch, and just get over it. Just look at it honestly, take account of it, and move forward without emotion. So compete with yourself. If I wasn't competing with myself, and not to sound like an arrogant prick, but we were pretty much number one by 2016. There was not a lot of people that could really compete with our results even now today. I haven't met a lot of people in my journey that could break down a cultivation space that has as diverse of a skill set as Sarah and I combined do. And so, I've worked with famous hydroponic growers and living soil growers and everything in between, and I can produce and execute in every one of those situations because every day I wake up and compete with myself. I don't worry about what other people do. I don't follow what other people do. If something's popular enough, it clearly makes it onto my radar. But when I wake up in the morning, I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm competing with myself. And not to sound like everything's perfect, I got shit days too. A couple weeks ago was pretty bad, not gonna lie. This is a cool one from Miggs. This is the homie. Oops, we're a little big on my comment thing. And so Miggs has been on a good upswing. It's pretty cool. It's been good to see his journey and see him make some success. And hell yeah, man, we're ready. We're ready when you are. So we're going to be launching another soil balancing class here probably the end of the month. I think it's going to be the last Friday of the month where we're going to start. And we're just going to keep running those. It's my goal to produce as many people as humanly possible that are qualified to do soil chemistry and we're just going to flood the market with extremely talented people that are good at doing math. That's my new goal for 2022 and beyond. I agree. Inky is awesome. I love me some Inky Johnson. That dude gets it fired up. I like some E.T., the hip hop preacher, too. He's pretty good. This is interesting. A little statement from David King. That's nice to see. So, Dave's got a lot of experience. He's been deep in them hills since he was a child. So that's cool. And, one of the funnest parts for me is like putting legitimate analytical tools and strategies into the hands of people that are just naturally gifted and talented at cultivating cannabis. It's good to see. Some other good comments. It's good to see people are enjoying us and at least staying tuned in. I wasn't sure if everybody's going to hang up right away or what was going to happen. This is where Real 1-2 here. So I hate to say it, man. And it's not me saying it. It's the world saying it. But, in Colorado, when they went online in 2012, almost every facility started out with somebody that had cannabis cultivation experience. And unfortunately, because of the context of the legacy markets, they're different than the legal markets. And a lot of people weren't able to adapt. There was a lot of systemic fungicide being used, and people just didn't cut it. So there was a lot of really bad examples that came out of Colorado in those first couple years. Didn't get much better in California. And so unfortunately, there's a fairly sizable distaste by new facilities to start with those that have cannabis experience. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just reporting the reality of what is. And so in order to get one of those opportunities, you need to really know why and what it is you're doing and have a functional strategy for what's demanded on you, navigating heavy metals, navigating the pesticides. It's very, very difficult. What up? Yeah, thanks for noticing the new video quality. I upgraded to the YouTube package, got me a ZVE10 with the Sigma 16 lens, and this shit is almost too crisp. I'm not gonna lie, it made me super uncomfortable the first time I tried to go this crisp. But it is what it is. They say this is what you need moving forward, so we're gonna do what it is. And I appreciate it. I'm glad here we got a homie understanding this is just good general advice. So what else we got here? Some good advice here. Yeah, keep it moving. It's quicksand. It's La Brea tar pits. It's an extinction event. If you're sitting still, laying back on your heels, this is not a time to do it. This is not a time to do it. So, I'll agree. I don't want to offend anybody, but, the guys that I came with were really, really respected for their quality, and I was very fortunate to be inside of a group of people that were able to get by on very light applications of pesticides and things like that, and so that's good. So right on. Glad Smiley's enjoying it. Smiley's in the master class. It's really going to be exciting to see what goes on with his garden into the future. Like I said many times, I really like Smiley and what he's doing. I think he's one of the most important figures in the cannabis industry doing the fearless shit. Good luck getting any of these other popular dudes to show a live update of their garden. Most people are stacking photos from 2016 when they had heroic ones. Never show the bad shit. Whack. So let's see what else. Yeah, Karen knows what's up. Karen is, I guess you could say, one of our masterclass students over there in Australia, and farmer psychology is very difficult. You can be as good as you could dream of at a certain technique, but if you can't communicate effectively, if you can't build trust, I guess that's one of the most important things. Like, I know I get pretty wild on the internet and kind of come loose, but like when it's time to consult, the first condition of consulting is building trust. I think one of the most important factors of building trust is clearly and honestly defining your limitations. I think most people, when they get an opportunity at a big project, they're afraid to say, I don't know. When I was younger and got an opportunity to work in my uncle's brokerage office doing produce sales, I made a mistake one morning and I wrote down the wrong destination for the truck. So instead of going south to California, it went to Central California, Salinas, with a load of melons, which to the loss to the farmer was about $5,000, which at that time in 1999 was more than my pay for the 3-month melon season. And so I made one mistake shipping a truck the wrong direction, which cost my uncle $5,000 because it cost the farmer $5,000, and my uncle isn't going to pass that loss on to the farmer. And so with one swipe of a pen, I caused more damage than was my paycheck for that 3-month period. And one of the things I'm most grateful for is the way my family has handled some of these situations. And when it came to light that we sent a truck full of melons to the wrong location in California and it was a total loss, my uncle just turned to me calmly and he says, "It's okay to say you don't know. It's not okay to send $5,000 off a cliff to be lit on fire. Tell me you don't know." And from that point forward, I never went back. If there's something that's outside of my current professional capabilities, I clearly define that to the farm. And that's one of the things that I communicate in our first conversations with the farm is one thing that you need to know about me is where my limitations stop, I will define them and we will together go find somebody that has that complementary contribution and that has that level of professional capability of the subject at hand. I think that's one of the biggest things you can do to gain trust by a farmer, because if you don't gain trust by the farmer, they're not going to do what you say, plain and simple. And then you're going to be scratching your head trying to figure out where the results are coming from, bad or good, because they're not doing what you're instructing them to do because they don't trust you. So yeah. Is there a date set for the next basic training? So we're doing week 3 on Friday, and it's a 5-week session, so it's going to be a few weeks after that. So I'd say at minimum 4 to 6 weeks from now. When Sarah comes back on next week, we'll announce the calendar for the upcoming stuff. And Space Cat knows what's up. I've known Space Cat for 10 years, and she has been slowly chipping away at her goal and trying to follow in our Soil Food Web footsteps. And after 3 years of perseverance, she has now been put in position to manage her own cannabis cultivation facility, which is fucking rad. So we are super excited to see what's going to be going down there. Space Cat has been grinding away in a tent, making the most out of a tent, doing as much research as possible to put herself in the position that will lead to the greatest opportunity for success. And as long as we got her back, I can almost guarantee she will be success. So yeah, good shout out from to Smiley. Smiley's a good dude. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things play out in Mexico. I don't know if it's just the news, but it sounds like there's some pretty good turf wars going down there. I used to do some pretty wild shit in Mexico, so I'm down. If you get an opportunity, I love tacos. I love jumping borders to Mexico. I got you. So, hell yeah. So yeah, I think, I don't know if anybody has any like specific questions. I kind of went off on some tangents today, but my goal was to provide value. I think a lot of people, myself including, the reason why I came on tonight and did this series is the last couple weeks I've been searching for answers. And so if I'm searching for answers, I promise there's probably a lot of people out there also searching for answers. And so I thank you for tuning in to this episode. Hope I didn't offend anybody's fragile ears. But nonetheless, if your fragile ears were offended, you're probably not going to make it. So to those of you that are capable of hearing some reality and some truth, I hope you've gained some value from what I offered tonight. We'll see you next Wednesday. I'm not sure if we're going to do another real talk or we need to get back onto the basics. We got a pretty loaded schedule putting videos together for our master classes, so we'll see what transpires. But nonetheless, we'll reconvene next Wednesday, same time, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Peace, homies. Get it.